You found it. This is the Radio Lawrence podcast where we discuss local art, politics, and community. Thanks for joining us as we host conversations with the people that make up the fabric of our town. I am your host, Shane Powers. Joining us today is Congressional candidate Craig Musser. Craig, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Glad to have you. First of all, I typically ask my guests about their history with Lawrence, and you are the first person that I will interview that is not from the city of Lawrence. Where are you from, Craig?
So I live outside of Ellenwood, Kansas, and it's part of the 1st District, and so is Lawrence. So it's one of the reasons that I'm here, and I enjoyed your podcast that you had with Lauren a few weeks back.
Well, thank you. And that is sort of the explanation. You know, this is a Lawrence podcast. That is my ambition, but obviously a national congressional campaign is a pretty big deal, and it directly affects us as Lawrencians as you are running to be our congressman. So welcome as the first non-Lawrencian to be on the show. I'm glad to have you here. So let's start with what made you decide to run for Congress. Why do you want to do this?
Because I don't think our representatives are really representing us right now. I think there's more loyalty to the party, to donors, and so forth. And we need someone that's going to actually listen to us and do what we need to do. And I think as being a member of the United Kansas Party, that puts me in a good position. I'm not holding to anybody. I can listen, I can do stuff. I've done some politics, a little bit of politics in the past. So I just saw an opportunity, and I have the time available at the moment. So I wanted to jump in and give it a try.
Gotcha. So let's dig into your campaign a little bit. As I started my research, the first thing that stuck out to me is way up at the top, before we even get to a campaign platform, the top of your webpage says Republican sensibilities and libertarian ideals. Let's delve into that a little bit. What are Republican sensibilities?
So from my standpoint, the Republican aspect is, what matters around the kitchen table. The budget matters, some common sense things of, whether it's food prices, how do we address things, don't get too elaborate with anything, be straightforward, be honest with people, and just deal with the situation.
And what would you define as libertarian ideals?
I really don't like the government being involved in too many things. I recognize the government needs to do certain things for us, like take care of people, the military, and so forth, and education to a degree. But they don't need to be in our private lives. They don't need to be digging through a lot of data about us. We just need to be able to live how we want to live and go from there.
I think that libertarians and Democrats have a lot in common, and there are a lot of massive divergences. So I'm interested to see where you fall in this spectrum and how that all works out as we discuss some of the issues that we face as a nation right now. I'm not presenting these in any order of importance, but I have a small list of things that affect us all that I kind of want to discuss with you and hear your thoughts from your own perspective with these libertarian ideals and how you think that the government factors into these various equations. Let's start with data centers. It's been a very big topic recently, nationally and also locally, as they seem to be trying to pop these data centers up all over the place. There's one trying to go in Osawatomie. There's one very near us here in Tonganoxie that they're trying to put through. And these things consume irrational quantities of resources, electricity, water. And it seems like the populace of these places don't necessarily want them. What is your stance on that, and where does the government factor into this equation and discussion?
This is where the government needs to listen to the people, because every area is a little bit different. There's a county in southwest Kansas that honestly wants to attract one because they have the wind energy, they have the solar power and so forth, and they feel that they can support one without affecting the rest of the residents. And that's probably a very special case because most of them are trying to get put in the middle of everything and suck power from everybody else. And then your rates go up, which is definitely not fair. So while I don't want the government involved, we do need to respect people's rights and so forth. But there's certain places that you want to present this. It's why we have industrial parks. It's why we have certain things placed in certain areas. So I think that's what we have to look at. Everybody wants data. I mean, we all have limited data on our phones and computers and everything else. But how much do you truly need? I guess that's more of a social, society question. But yes, they're going to use a lot of resources, and if you're not ready for it, then you're going to have to use the government's resources to stop it.
And as I understand libertarianism, that might be somewhere that you seem to be at least slightly departed from the ethos in that. Correct me if I'm wrong. The libertarian answer to that question is it's capitalism, and if the capitalists want to build a data center in your backyard, then you should have bought that property because now it's theirs and they're going to do with it as they see fit.
Yes, that is correct. Yes, your take on that is correct.
At least I have a good understanding of libertarianism. Next topic that I want to discuss is the war in Iran. And obviously that's a very big and hairy topic. And I'm fine with dedicating as much time as you see fit and as you are interested in doing. But it is another departure where libertarians may not necessarily agree with Republicans, may not necessarily agree with Democrats, although on the topic of war, I feel that libertarianism is a lot closer to liberalism in that libertarians are generally against international interventions. What is your stance on what's happening in Iran right now from the standpoint of what we're actually doing, and also from the standpoint of how it was gone about?
Yeah, this is where I think Congress really just stepped back and ignored things. One, getting into the war was not called for. There was no plan. There's obviously no plan. We've done very poorly at trying to rebuild other countries that we've gone into, like Iraq and Afghanistan. So what's the plan with Iran if you're going to go demolish it, take it over, or have the people, take over? So very much against it. I think from a standpoint when the president ran, America First, keeping out of all these wars was kind of in line. And then it diverged, and unfortunately, I think it was done because of politics, because of other issues going on. And it is. I mean, it's a tough situation for those people, but to use our tax money to involve our military and lose lives over it and drive our economy kind of sideways doesn't make any sense to me.
And how do you respond to the claim that Iran was within 2 weeks of having a nuclear weapon?
I think it goes back to the whole Iraq thing. I remember that situation where we kept saying, they had all kinds of weapons and so forth, and it wasn't true. I don't think it was true this time either. I think this was a made-up scenario, and we took an opportunity to dive into it, and no one really thought it through.
Another issue that arises with this is the fact that it was done unilaterally. There was no approval from Congress. How do you feel as an aspiring congressman that the Congress should assert itself when the president chooses to act unilaterally in matters of national interest and in areas where congressional approval is specifically called for and required?
Yeah, and that's where Congress laid down. They abdicated their responsibilities. I can see, when a president needs to respond something in an urgent situation. This was not an urgent situation. This is where the leadership in Congress should have known and probably did know. But then there was nobody else in Congress that stood up And as a congressman, you can't always stop something from happening, but you sure as heck can go out and protest and make your voice heard and stand up for your people and try to hold some people accountable for what's going on.
Absolutely. Being from Western Kansas and holding these Republican sensibilities, I would have to assume that you at least sometimes vote both sides of the aisle. My first question is, did you vote for President Trump?
No. I have family members that did, but no, I did not find him to be an honorable person from the get-go and have reasonable policies or expectations when he became president. So no, I did not vote for him either time.
I want to do something of a word association game, as it were. I'm going to give you what might be classified as like a bumper sticker slogan, and I would like to hear your opinion on that slogan, that matter.
Okay.
Medicare for all.
Not quite there, but I think there's parts of Medicare that need considered to be universal. Like, I'm a very strong proponent of preventive maintenance of your health and so forth. And I think the government could step in and make that universal. Immunizations, doctor visits for checkups and so forth, and monitoring your blood pressure and so forth, so on.
Next bumper sticker slogan. Corporate/PAC money out of politics.
Absolutely. Read some articles that Hawaii's headed there. Montana's trying to get there. It'll be interesting to see the court system handle what they're doing. But yeah, the PAC money, the joke online in Kansas is that there's certain billionaires that basically finance the politics in Kansas. And I think you get rid of that money, you all of a sudden open people up to real ideas and real conversations and not just falling in line.
And how are you personally funding your campaign?
Just straight personal donors, no PAC money. I'm not totally doing the Bernie Sanders thing, but it's along those lines.
Next bumper sticker slogan, free and fair elections.
There are a free and there are a fair. So the whole drive in Congress to pass something that doesn't need to be passed is another waste of time, waste of energy, waste of resources. It raises a lot of money for certain groups. It diverts attention from what needs to get done. And the only thing I can say is I'm hoping they're actually working behind the scenes and this is just a smokescreen. But I'm not positive of that.
So we currently have a sitting president who claims that an election was stolen from him in 2020, which is a pretty bold claim, but also that same individual participated in fake elector slates and attempting to overturn the results of what has been certified a free and fair election. And so I wonder if we are not headed towards a place of not free and fair elections, and what should be done about that, and if it is a legitimate concern in your eyes.
I think in some parts of the country there can be some concerns, but my wife is a person that works in the polls. When people show up, the people take great pride when people show up and give them honest, fair answers and watch everything. And I think it's a little bit different. You can say one thing out in public, but when you kind of step into the building to actually do it, I think things change. It's a shame that you have a past president like Jimmy Carter that worked so hard to take our fair election format to all these other countries throughout and monitor those elections. And now they've had to start monitoring our elections just to make sure. That says something about where our society is willing to go. And at this point, I think they're free, fair. I think it's a lot of talk, but we'll see over the next 2-4 years.
So we've already had the money in politics discussion, but you did just invoke Jimmy Carter, which Jimmy famously sold his peanut farm when he was elected president because he said that ownership of this private business could potentially provide a route for him to become corrupted. How do you feel about the fact that our president has not diverged from any of his own business interests? In fact, he's profited billions of dollars as the inhabitant of the White House. How do we rein in these things that, we already have the emoluments clause, which prevents the president from taking money from foreign countries and really covers a lot of that ground. How do we deal with the fact that that's not being observed? And this can of worms, this Pandora's box, has been opened now. If one person can come in and, first of all, outright lie and say, I'm going to put all of my business holdings in a blind trust that will be monitored by my children or whatever, and then turn around and at the same time launch crypto schemes and $100,000 watches that presumably no one's ever seen, taking jets from Qatar, Trump phones. Like there's the list is as long as my leg of ways that he is directly profiting from the office of President of the United States. How do you as a congressperson address that and try to put the lid back on that? Are you interested in addressing that and putting the lid back on that?
Yeah, the lid has to get put back on, and that's another one of these that Congress has just kind of ignored the situation, because the way we're set up, you have kind of two options. Either Congress has to take action, which, again, the Republican Party is not interested in doing except for a handful of people. And then the other one is the voters. The voters have to decide what party gets to rule. And I've found it interesting over the years that often we have one party in the office and one party controlling Congress. So we have that kind of back and forth. But right now we don't have that. We have an individual that will take advantage of anything and everything, and nobody's willing to step forward. And that's one of those, in my situation, you got to step forward. I mean, if you're a congressman, you have to step forward and you have to call it like it is. I mean, he's making money and he's not hiding it. It's not like a shell game, it's just straightforward.
It is quite blatant. Back to our bumper sticker slogan word association game.
All right.
Next association, tax the rich.
Taxing the rich is interesting because I think we don't really tax the rich. And even if we did tax the rich, they have the means in order to get around it. I think the real answer is simplifying the tax code, taking away a lot of exemptions and a lot of abilities by rich and certain corporations to play with their books, so to speak, in order to get out of paying taxes.
So would you support something that bears a name like billionaire tax?
I would say no, because it's a bad name and you're never going to get it passed by calling it that. But yes, you would have to come up with something. We need to come up with something, because every time we pass a tax bill, we allow billionaires to get off the hook, and we slide more and more down to the middle class, lower class, and so forth. And yeah, we supposedly get a tax cut, but it's not even close to what the millionaires and billionaires are getting. And it needs to go the other way.
I believe I heard a statistic just in the last couple of days that the effective tax rate for the top 1% was something like 23%, and the effective tax rate for pretty much everyone else was 24, 25%. So, it shifts a lot of the tax burden to people that don't have the assets, which inherently makes it regressive, right?
Yes. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons not to go to a sales tax or the tariffs and so forth, because it really affects the people that are at the lower end more than it does anybody else. And your usage of the effective tax or the real tax that results, that's what we have to look at. That's what has to change.
I think that's probably also an area where you might diverge from some of your libertarian brethren. I haven't heard you say tax is theft yet, so.
No, I mean, there's a reality of, yes, you can say government's gone, I don't want to pay my taxes and this, that, whatever. But the reality is there are certain benefits we have to have from the government. We have to pay a reasonable amount in order to have those. So you can't just go, nah.
Final bumper sticker slogan.
All right.
Abolish ICE.
ICE needs to go back to what it was designed for. So ICE and FISA was designed to handle terrorists, designed to find the people coming into the country or already in the country that were going to harm Americans. We've turned it into a very strong militia that just walks in and takes people away, even if they are true benefits to our society, our economy, and so forth. Shooting someone is just totally out of hand, inappropriate, and I can't believe there wasn't more outrage on both sides of the aisle over that.
One of the biggest elements of that whole situation that concerns me is the removal of due process from individuals. And this isn't just an ICE issue either. It is becoming a larger governmental issue in my eyes. So I like to say, if one of us loses due process, we all lose due process. And I see our government engaging. Let me back up and explain that statement. If someone can be accused of a crime and summarily disappeared or killed as a result of that accusation, that person was denied their day in court. Therefore, anyone could be denied that same day in court. And I see it with ICE arresting American citizens erroneously or maliciously. And I also see it with what is happening in the Caribbean with these quote unquote narco traffickers. There is strong evidence that I use the term we very loosely. I don't feel like I am party to this we, but it is done in my name, that these people are being murdered in the Caribbean by the United States government. And their response is, oh, those were narco traffickers. They had drugs on that boat. And that's not how justice works. That is not due process. That is someone saying, you are a drug dealer and I'm going to kill you for it. And if that is the law of the land, if that's how the government operates, what is to stop the government from saying that you, Craig Musser, are a drug dealer and killing you? Or I, Shane Powers, have committed some offense against the government that warrants immediate death, and they don't ever have to prove that out in a court of law. Where does Congress fit into this whole situation? Where are they?
Right now, it doesn't seem like they're anywhere. I mean, they've kind of ghosted the situation. And yes, there was some outrage. I'm concerned that their outrage isn't going to carry through into the elections. Setting things up to have due process is critical. I think as a white male and white people in particular, we don't think this stuff happens to us. I think, unfortunately, we've looked at it and said it's okay to happen to others. But as you said, when due process goes out the window, we're all affected, no matter what. And all of us can be taken advantage of and so forth. And Congress has to step in, has to reapply the moral standard that this country has had in the past and needs to have going forward, and needs to get our justice system back in line by selecting and approving justices that are effective and knowledgeable. We need to have an FBI and really that whole Department of Treasury and the rest of it back on track. And as Congress, you have to call them in front of you, hold them accountable, pull their money back if need be. I mean, we just gave, $1 billion whatever dollars to ICE and said, go to it. You can't do that as Congress. I mean, you can't just dole out money and not hold people accountable. And that's what we're doing.
And do you apply that same logic to our military budget that has now exceeded $1 trillion?
Yes. Back in the 90s, I got RIFT, reduction in force, out of an Army depot. And it wasn't great, but at the same time, I knew our government cared about the budget and somebody cared about prioritizing the military.
Can you elaborate a little bit on what you're saying right now? Because
Sure.
Frankly, I don't understand. I don't know what reduction in force.
Sure.
I mean, I understand the words.
Yes.
There are too many of you.
Yes.
You have to leave. How does this apply, and what is this? I've never even heard of RIF.
Okay. So back in the 90s, President Bush started this. Congress jumped on board. President Clinton followed through with it. But there was a number of accepted methods of going through every department, and you had to reduce your budget by 10%, say. And you went through, and then, the trickle-down effect, every group had to eliminate X number of people. And
Okay. So a more official and reasonable version of what we know as Doge.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yes. And how that translates into the military is you look at every politician is out there fighting for their military bases and so forth in their districts, regardless of how it impacts everybody else. And right now, we're behind on our missile systems. We're behind on some other weaponry that the Chinese and the Russians have got ahead on us because we're too busy playing politics and not letting our military people be the basis for what we do and how we go about doing it.
Based on the reporting that I'm seeing from what's happening in Iran right now, I also have a concern that our military-industrial complex has run amok, building weapons of the past and pocketing a substantial amount of money. So my multi-part statement here is the Pentagon has failed all of their audits in recent history. They can't account for 60% of their assets. We keep increasing their budget, and at the same time, we seem to be sustaining pretty substantial damage from a collection of $30,000 Shahed drones. And, as we're firing these $1 million missiles to try to take out what equates to a new Toyota, I can't help but feel like there's a bit of a rub there.
Yeah, there's disconnect between the war and how it's been changing over the years, and we're not keeping up with it. We're not keeping up with the financial aspect. Congress isn't paying attention. We're spending a lot of money. We dole out a lot of military money, to Israel. Taiwan just came into the news because of the president's visit to China. And it really does keep the military complex going. President Eisenhower warned us about things of this nature. And it's coming to play because there is a lot of money. There is a lot of PAC money, a lot of lobbying that goes on. So anytime you add in all that money and it makes a difference, going back to earlier, get the money out of politics, and I think some things actually do change.
And you mentioned Israel specifically. What do you feel our relationship with Israel should be?
I think we need to protect them. But at the same time, I think there has to be some give and take. They need to look at their neighbors and work with their neighbors, how they've behaved, and they keep bombing. I was laughing at the paper the other day. The one headline said about Israel and Hamas are reaching a peace agreement, and it's keep going. And the very next headline was Israel just bombed Gaza and blew up, 11 people or whatever. As people that control the finances of Israel, we have to expect bigger standards, better standards.
And would you call what's happening in Gaza a genocide?
I don't know enough about the thing to call it that, but on the outside looking in, it's a one-way battle, and we're destroying the livelihood of a certain group of people, and we're focused on doing that. And I say we because the U.S. is financing Israel. I mean, whether we're giving them the military means or whether we're giving them the money, one way or the other, we're deeply involved in it.
And as a congressperson, would you vote to cease military assistance to Israel?
If they didn't meet certain standards, absolutely. And I think people get hung up on, oh, you're targeting Jews or you're targeting this, and then that's just making the whole discussion a mess, because it's really not a mess. Here's the facts of what's happening. Here's what we can do about it. And as a congressman, you need to take those steps and limit the money that's going there.
I think that's a very clever trick that they've begun instituting, is to deride any criticism of the Israeli government as anti-Semitic. And it really shuts down any conversation when you can look at this and go, hey, the official actions of your government are negative. You cannot do this. If they can then turn around and go, what, because I am Jewish? You're an anti-Semite. It's like, no, I didn't say because you're Jewish. It doesn't matter if it's Israel doing this or Russia waging a war of aggression. I don't support wars of aggression anywhere on the planet by any sect or nationality, race, creed. I don't believe that that's how countries should behave. And you don't get to cloak yourself in the armor of anti-Semitism to just disregard all of these atrocious actions.
Yeah, I mean, we have to gain our moral standards back. As a country, we're sliding in a certain direction, and I think we have to look at who we're electing, how we're electing people, and they have to meet certain standards going forward.
Next up in your campaign platform here is being pro-child, and I'm going to lump that in with the one before it, which
Sure.
is women's rights. And those two things are closely paralleled. Obviously, there are connections there through women. When I see women's rights, I go to a woman's right to abortion. I don't want to put words in your mouth. What is your stance on women's rights, and what do you intend to convey through the political pillar of women's rights?
When it comes to what's happening right now, I think it's very sad that we have the government that thinks it has rights, and it's taking those rights away from women. They have autonomy over their bodies and what happens to their bodies. We've changed the rules of the game in our culture war. But since we've gotten that change, we've had 20% more abortions. So the approach that certain groups are taking is certainly not working. You can see the detriment in women's health care. Access is going down. Just in general, what they have to go through these days. And I don't think many people can understand the mental anguish that you got to go through when you're carrying a baby and it's stillborn, or you know something's already wrong with your baby and you still have to go through the whole process. That's just mean, cruel, and vicious. I will say that Senator Gillibrand and Senator Marshall have been very supportive of getting money out there for mothers and for children. I think both of them have different sides of that view. Moms.gov is kind of a nice little package. But what about the women that aren't going to have children for one reason or another? What about their health care? What about the health care of minorities that we just kind of brush away? And then I look at children, regardless of how they come into the world, taking care of them is critical. If you feed them, educate them, bring them up, you're going to pay less as a society. Your choice is you can have them be a total burden for the rest of their lives. You can have them end up in jail. You can have them end up somewhere else or other stuff happening to them. So looking out for the children is critical. It's one thing to say, okay, you're a woman, you got pregnant, you have to have this child. Okay, now what are you going to do with the child? You can't just ignore the child.
And so with that, you support government policies like WIC, SNAP benefits.
Yes.
Yes. And you also are a proponent of public schools.
Yes.
And paying the people that operate those schools.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the most discouraging things about the Farm Bill was the reduction in the SNAP, which is just insane. That money almost automatically goes right back into the economy. You want to grow the economy, keep the SNAP benefits going. Who also benefits from that? Farmers benefit from that. So I'm not even talking about the people that actually make use of that money. I'm talking about all the other people that are involved, and to think that we can just eliminate it and say it's okay is just really bizarre to me.
And with that, do you also support free school lunches?
Yes. I was on the school board for a number of years, and you would be surprised. Well, you may not be surprised. As the studies that show if children get breakfast and lunch, they do much better in school. They retain information. Things go a lot better.
It's almost like hunger is distracting.
Yeah, you could say that. And it's surprising how many people out there fall into that category.
Once a child leaves the public school system, should they desire to go for further education, what are your thoughts on college debt and the bumper sticker slogan of free college?
I'm not there for free college. I think the movement in high schools to get kids into college courses is great. The cost of college is really high, but the other part of that is you go get a loan, and the interest rate on that typically is higher than what it is on your mortgage. Think about that. Yep. It's a safe loan. You can't get out of the loan. The bank knows they're getting their money, but yet they're going to charge a higher interest rate than almost all other things, except credit cards. That part makes absolutely no sense. Supporting community college are critical. You can go at least 2 years to a community college for the price of 1 year at a university. You can go to tech schools. When I was on the school board, I pushed really hard for VOTech and building a school just for higher technology usage. because that is a huge need. Every business out there can't find enough technical-oriented people.
Well, I think that also technical schools have a large role in our future, as we've discussed the data centers and the AI that comes along with them. As AI begins to take jobs from working Americans, which it inevitably will, the jobs that it can't take are plumber, HVAC technician, carpenter. AI can't build me a house yet. And so, yes, I agree that vocational technical schools have to play a much larger role. How do you feel about the Biden era forgiveness of student loans?
I think he went a little too far, and the backlash that resulted was unfortunate. There are certain people out there of an economic status that needs forgiveness, and you're just putting people behind the eight ball. When you're trying to pay for a car or some sort of transportation, paying rent, paying a loan that you can't get out of for education, and it becomes the only thing that's stopping you from actually climbing the ladder, so to speak, in our economy, then it's too much. You got to do something.
Well, and as a good capitalist, you have to allow that these people are being restricted from participating in the economy. That, as an argument in and of itself, was always relatively compelling to me. I don't necessarily consider myself a good capitalist, but if you are saddled with a $500 a month student loan payment, that's $500 per month that you are not using to stimulate your local economy. It seems like I don't know. I was in favor of Biden's push to eliminate student loan debt for a number of reasons, but that was the most broadly accepted and compelling reason for me. So, Craig, I think that we have covered all of the campaign pillars here. Do you have anything on? You've brought a lot of papers with you. Do you have anything on those papers that you would like to discuss?
Yeah, I'd like to dive into healthcare a little bit more.
Sure, one of my favorite topics.
I know. I think it's not underappreciated in the sense that, the health of us is a big deal, and paying for healthcare is very costly. But when you look at the federal budget, the number one item on that list is social programs. And you can identify Medicare and Medicaid right off the top, directly related to how much healthcare costs.
Are we excluding military budgets from this discussion?
Well, it depends on how you lump stuff. The interest rate, depending on the interest loans that you got to pay for the government right now, could be considered the number 2 line item ahead of the military, which is absolutely scary. So it comes back to, how do you lump it? But if you lump like Social Security and Medicaid and Medicare and all that together, then it's a very large chunk that affects both the federal government and it affects the states. Because now the states are going to be required to put more money into the Medicaid program if they want to maintain the same level of benefits, which most states are opting out of and not doing. So the next option is to take care of healthcare. And some of the, things that have happened in my life kind of point me in certain directions. I already talked about preventive healthcare and trying to make that universal, but my oldest son was headed to the beach with friends and tried to avoid a car, and in doing so, basically rode his Jeep Cherokee down the road with his brother doing play-by-play because he was in a car in front of him. He lived. He got pulled up by fantastic emergency people, flown to a trauma center, but because he was on his own insurance, nobody else paid. So think of all the costs associated with that that somebody's paying for. Your health care is covering situations like that. So there's that part. I had a father-in-law that really didn't track his diabetes very well, ended up in a very, very bad situation before he died, and very costly. But, the monitoring systems that we have today could have helped. My mother-in-law, she got sepsis because she went into the hospital, and because of somebody's error at cleaning or not cleaning things up, she got sepsis and ended up causing her basically to be in a wheelchair for probably 20 years of her life. So there's just things of that nature that I see. My father died of cancer because preventive care, going to the doctor, getting checked out, actually having things, done, was not something, a strong man would do. And he paid the ultimate price for it. So from a healthcare standpoint, I think that has to be higher on the list. Congress keeps talking about it, but we're not doing enough.
So with these personal relations to what I describe as the American medical nightmare, why would you not support single-payer healthcare?
I think it's not that in the long run people wouldn't support it. I think right now you're not going to get it through. So if you ask for the whole package, you're not getting anywhere. So taking the first bite of the apple and doing the preventive care that is going to reduce costs some now and drastically make improvements going down the road, I think is the better avenue. And then once people get comfortable with that, then you can take another step forward with something else. But most people are just going to say no with a drastic change. But I think you can take a change that people kind of already accept, because if you look at health insurance right now, they cover a lot of preventive stuff because they know it reduces their cost. Helps their profit, but it reduces their cost, and that's kind of what we're after at this point, is reducing that cost, and then we got to deal with the insurance companies.
Isn't that kind of how we got through Obamacare, though? This incremental. I don't believe that the people, the American populace, are the obstacle between Americans and healthcare. I believe that insurance lobbyists, because it is such an incredibly powerful industry, are a much bigger obstacle. And I think that the incrementalism is how we got dragged out so massively. I mean, what year did Obama pass the Affordable Care Act? 2006? Has it been 20 years? And all that was a step towards that was a Republican policy. So Republicans say we support this policy. Democrats say we want health care for all, Medicare for all, single payer. And then Obama comes along and he's like, okay, we'll do the Republican thing. And then the Republicans go, no, never mind. We don't want that thing because you said it. And somehow he mounts this massive fight that forces us all to deal with an insurance company. It's a terrible deal. Just on its face, it's like the government is going to make you get health insurance. And it's like, why don't you just include that in my taxes and I can go to the hospital? I get concerned about the incrementalism because now, 20 years goes by and a new president comes in and he's like, Obamacare is the worst thing ever. I'm striking it down. And we're going back to the old way. And I feel like if the government would take that leap and go, we are doing single-payer healthcare. Healthcare is free at the point of service. It is included in your benefits package as an American citizen. Once people get a taste of that and they're like, wow, how convenient. I just go to the doctor when I'm sick and I don't get this ridiculous medical bill. Or, I was involved in a car accident and it didn't cost me $500,000. That's incredible. That's really hard to claw back away from people.
Yes, and that's one of the fears from a budget aspect, that a lot of people are like, man, you offer that up and then it's staying, like Social Security, heaven forbid, Medicare, Medicaid, all the things that we've put in place that we put out there and everybody liked it. I mean, if you actually told people what's in Obamacare and what it's doing for them right now, they'd all be like, yeah, exactly. We want to keep that. But because of the name associated with it, it's identified different ways. I think that you're right in the sense that whether it's the insurance companies, whether it's the for-profit medical groups that are on the stock market and heaven forbid, they look out for medical stuff, but they're looking out for their stockholders. That's a lot of money going to politicians. I think you could get there if you figured out how to finance it and pay for it and justify it. I think as a political group, we haven't done that. We haven't done the homework. We haven't done that yet. We keep saying we want the universal whatever, but truly getting people to understand, how do you pay for it?
That is my least favorite question in the whole debate of the whole thing. I just get so riled by how are you going to pay for it? Because as we just discussed, we're spending like $2 billion a day in a war in Iran that has have you looked at the support numbers for that right now? It's like 20%, like just the least popular thing you could ever possibly do. And nobody said, how are we going to pay for it? They just went and did the thing. And it's so it really ruffles me when it's something, when it's something for you, something for me, something for our children. It's like, well, gee, golly, how are you going to pay for that? But when it's some imperialist conquest around the globe, it's like, well, obviously we have to do that. We have to topple Saddam. We have to invade Iran right now. We're going to stop at Cuba on the way home. What the hell are you talking about? Like, how, where are the how are you going to pay for it people in that room?
Yeah, we choose very much on what we want to do, and I get asked quite often, is like, you're willing to give benefits to some way that really doesn't work that hard, or they don't work as much as me, or they don't put in the hours that I do in order to make my paycheck, and you're willing to hand out money to them. And we're still kind of caught in that mode. But I'll blame Congress, because we don't have a group of politicians that are willing to get together and say, this is what we need, this is how we're going to do it, this is what we need to do to pull it off, and just keep pushing it. What was it? 12 months ago, everybody was, we got to do something about healthcare. We got to do something about healthcare. Still haven't done anything about healthcare. And it takes consistent focus in order to pull it together and get public support. And I agree. I think the public would be like, if you can make it simple for me to show up to the doctor and get taken care of, and I don't have to fill out 25 different forms. I don't have to wait till I get my taxes back, because then I can take it off of my taxes, all of those types of crazy loopholes. I think we could get there, but it's a concerted effort by a true group of politicians that want to make it happen and not just talk about it.
With that, I want to move to the last question that I have for you in the pre-prepared interview section. And that question is exactly surrounding the big, scary socialist word. How do you feel about this, what really looks to me like a shift in thought process among the American people? And maybe I spend too much time down left-wing YouTube holes, but when I look around and I see Mayor Zoran Mamdani in New York, I see candidates like Graham Plattner in Maine running for Senate, I see Abdul El Sayed in Michigan. These people are running on on strong democratic socialist campaigns like Bernie Sanders, and they're having a lot of success. Do you feel that there's a shift happening in that direction? And what are your thoughts on that? My perception of that shift.
So you're saying we're shifting further to the left because those people are being successful? Is that what you're...
I am saying that those left-wing ideas are gaining popularity, whether you want to call them democratic socialism, whether you want to call them left-wing or liberal ideals, doesn't make any difference to me. It is but a name. But the concepts that you and I have been talking about pretty lengthily, like single-payer healthcare, like free school lunches, these are all, campaign pillars of people who are getting a lot of national attention. And I would even venture to say the only politicians in the country that anyone is excited about are espousing these ideals that are definitely counter to everything that we're experiencing right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think a couple of things come into play there. I think you have people that are brave enough to stand up and want to be elected, and not necessarily just want to keep a job. And I think we have too many politicians that are going to toe the party line, so to speak, especially on the Republican side, because they want to keep their job. And we need an election cycle where we start phasing those people out. Because when I go out and I talk to Kansans, and you don't phrase it as socialist or liberal or anything else, but you talk to them about what's important to them, about their community and how they take care of their community and how people bind together and so forth, and how we need to take care of people, and how they can give examples of how they've opened, soup kitchens, or they've helped out families and so forth. And you start going, okay, these people want to claim they're like diehard Republicans, libertarian, and it's like, you're not. You don't, what you want is what is people willing to do for you, but you're hung up on what the name is versus what you really want to have happen. And we got to break that. Somehow we need to get people to divorce themselves from a certain name or a certain party, so to speak, and just accept the fact, these are the things I want. What politician's going to give those things to me? And that's been one of the most fascinating parts of this journey so far, is how people are talking about, like you just brought up, examples where people are out there fighting for others and different ideas and so forth. They want that. They just don't want it packaged in a certain way.
Very well stated. As I said, that is the end of my pre-prepared interview, which brings us to my favorite part of the show, which is the lightning round. In the lightning round, I'm going to ask you 10 questions. They are germane to absolutely nothing. You can answer in as many or as few words as you see fit. No explanation is necessary if you do not desire. Are you ready?
Sure.
Are you superstitious?
Man, I'm going to say no, but I got to admit, whenever I play baseball, there's something about certain things you got to do certain ways, but overall, I'm going to say no.
What is one irrational fear that you have?
Getting kidnapped and put in a box when I'm alive. Too many movies show that stuff.
What is the best soup?
Vegetable soup. You just get everything out there, just throw it all together. I mean, we took everything out of our garden growing up, and you just mixed it, and, it worked.
What is one song that you turn off immediately?
Ooh, I don't know that I have a song. I can't handle rap. It's more the some of the lyrics I just can't handle. I don't necessarily have one song. I don't know my music well enough to give you one song, but I would say rapping.
What's your favorite movie snack?
Popcorn. Has to be popcorn. I think you've had some other guests say that. And it definitely has to have the popcorn with all the butter, makes your fingers like almost slimy. Yes.
If you had a superpower, what would it be?
Creativity. Just creativity, pulling people together, creative ways of getting something done.
What is one conspiracy theory that you believe has merit?
Oh, wow. We almost went there earlier with the voting. The analysis that they did with the last election in some highly concentrated Democratic strongholds, and you go through the data and you look at it, and it makes absolutely no sense. And you're just like, okay, did someone truly get into the computer system and do something? But you look at the data and it really makes you scratch your head. So, yeah, that has to be mine.
What is the farthest you've ever traveled from home?
I don't know, somewhere in the Caribbean, probably.
When you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Baseball player. I wanted to be a pitcher like Tom Seaver, Noah Ryan. Oh, yeah. Baseball.
What is your favorite hobby?
Reading. Yeah, reading. I like to read a lot of different stuff. Most people would find it boring. But, I'm reading a good book on Social Security. I hate to admit that. But, I read anything and everything. There's some good books about Native Americans. I love a great mystery. I mean, give me a book and I'm good to go.
All right. Craig, you've successfully navigated the lightning round. I really appreciate you making the trip here to speak with me, and we wish you all the best in your run for Congress. Thanks so much for coming. Have a great night.
Thank you. Thank you very much.